Hey guys, tonight we drift down a slow, moonlit Nile. The water moves like a sheet of black silk beneath your fingers, cool and endless. A faint perfume of lotus and mud rises in the still air, and every ripple seems to whisper something older than words. You can almost hear the hum of insects from the reeds, and somewhere far off, a temple bell shivers through the night. It's peaceful, until you remember that this river once carried the dreams and fears of a civilization obsessed with eternity. You probably won't survive this mythological timeline without nodding off. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Nile glimmers beside you, wide and ancient, its slow heartbeat older than any kingdom. You drift in a small reed boat, following the current southward. The night sky is thick with stars, so bright they look like shards of crushed quartz spilled across black velvet. This is Egypt, before pharaohs wore crowns or scribes carved names into stone. The people along the banks have no pyramids yet, only whispers about spirits that hide in the river's mist and the desert wind. The first thing you notice about this landscape is how it breathes. Every gust of warm air feels alive, as though it's exhaled by something enormous sleeping beneath the sand. Even the dunes shift like slow creatures, rolling closer and then pulling away. You start to see why the earliest Egyptians believed their gods were born from the land itself. The river's rise and fall wasn't just a natural rhythm. It was a pulse, a sign of divine moods. By dawn, the horizon blushes gold. The desert changes color from charcoal to honey, then bursts into pink. The light feels thick enough to touch, warm and syrupy on your skin. You imagine the first people watching this same sunrise thousands of years ago, wondering who, or what, lit that fire in the sky. They named it Ra later, but right now, it's just mystery. A fisherman pulls past you, his net glittering with droplets. He hums a tune so old it probably doesn't have words anymore. Maybe he's offering it to the river, or maybe it's just something to keep away the silence. You realize that in this world, even simple acts, throwing a net, grinding grain, lighting an oil lamp, are prayers. Everything is tied to balance, to the thin line between chaos and order. Historians still argue whether the concept of Ma'at, that perfect equilibrium between truth, justice, and cosmic harmony, emerged naturally or was invented by the priestly class to keep people calm and obedient. Either way, it worked. You can feel the idea of floating in the warm air, invisible but heavy. Everything must stay in balance, or the world will fall apart. A quirky little fact: some early Egyptians thought the Nile's yearly flood came from tears shed by the goddess Isis as she mourned her husband Osiris. Each year's inundation was her grief renewing life. So next time you think of a flood, imagine it as divine crying therapy with agricultural benefits. The first settlements grow denser as your boat glides past. Mud brick huts squat close to the water, goats nibbling at their edges. Children chase each other with reeds, and mothers knead dough on smooth stones. You pass one man painting a clay pot with images of crocodiles and spirals. The paint is made from crushed malachite, green and luminous. That same mineral will someday become eyeshadow for queens, sunscreen for priests, and eyeliner for mummies. Egyptians truly understood multitasking. As the sun climbs higher, it burns away the mist. Palms lean over the river like drowsy sentinels. You spot something massive on the bank, a half-built structure of limestone blocks. Laborers haul ropes, sweat shining on their backs. It's not a pyramid yet, but you sense the ambition forming. Humans here want permanence. They want to trap the divine in geometry. One old man sits apart, drawing symbols in the sand with a stick. They're rough sketches of birds, eyes, and rippling lines. Proto-hieroglyphs, perhaps, the world's first attempt to make sound visible. He looks up as your shadow crosses his path, gives a knowing smile, and continues his work. It hits you that he's capturing immortality in miniature. Words will outlive even stone. You pause at a bend in the river where papyrus grows thick as walls. A heron stands perfectly still, waiting for a fish. Time here feels circular. Every sunrise repeats creation. Every sunset folds the world back into darkness. Maybe that's why Egyptians later believed death wasn't an ending, but a pause. A night before another dawn. The air smells faintly of dust and sweetness. A cluster of priests in white linen stand ankle-deep in the shallows, performing some ritual you can't quite decode. They're chanting softly, hands raised to the east. You imagine they're asking the sun to rise again tomorrow, just in case. People who live so close to nature can never take daylight for granted. One priest catches sight of you and smiles faintly, as if recognizing a fellow traveler between worlds. He raises a palm in blessing. The gesture feels ancient and familiar all at once. Then he turns back to the chant, his voice joining the others in a rhythm that mimics the lap of water against the shore. A breeze lifts your hair, and for a second, you almost believe the river is whispering your name. It's not a scary sound, more like a lullaby that stretches across millennia. You close your eyes and listen. The chant fades. The birds call out. Somewhere, a crocodile slides into the current, unseen but entirely present. A mainstream fact to anchor you. This river, the Nile, runs over 4,000 miles from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean, and it was Egypt's lifeline. Without it, there would have been no crops, no civilization, no pyramids, just sand. The Nile didn't just feed Egypt, it was Egypt. The sun is high now, and the sky blazes white. You can feel the world shifting underfoot, the sand whispering secrets of beginnings. Tomorrow, or thousands of years from now, someone will tell the story of how everything began from nothing, how the gods crawled out of darkness to sculpt the world. But for now, you just float, half asleep, lulled by the river's endless heartbeat. Somewhere downstream, creation waits. You open your eyes again to the endless shimmer of the Nile, and the light feels thicker now, almost like it's gathering weight, pressing softly against your skin. The air hums, not with insects, but with anticipation. Something's about to begin. You can almost hear it in the wind, a faint bubbling, a cosmic stirring, as if the whole universe is about to wake up. In the beginning, there wasn't much to see, no sky, no land, no Nile, no cats knocking over offerings. Just endless, swirling water, dark and silent. The Egyptians called it Nun, the primordial chaos. You drift through it now, weightless. There's no up or down, no sound except the echo of your own breath. Then, out of nowhere, a ripple moves through the nothingness. The first breath of creation. You don't see it so much as feel it, pressure building, like a bubble rising from the depths. And then, with a shimmer, a small mound of earth pushes through the surface of the water. It's glowing faintly, golden at the edges. You can smell warm clay and hear the sigh of something ancient finding form. This is the first land, the Benben, the sacred mound from which everything else will grow. On top of that mound stands a single being, Adam. He's not born from parents or carved from light. He just is. The Egyptians said he created himself, which, let's be honest, is a serious flex. Some stories say he coughed himself out of the chaos. Others say he sneezed. So technically, the first act of divine creation might have been a cosmic allergy attack. Adam looks around at the endless dark water and decides it's a little lonely. So he creates two more beings, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture. Depending on which temple's version you believe, he either spat or sneezed them into being. Again, very glamorous. They spin around him like twin breezes, dancing in the dawn light that still isn't quite sunlight yet. Historians still argue whether this creation story came from Heliopolis alone or whether it merged with older local myths as the kingdom expanded. But the pattern is the same. Chaos becomes water, water gives rise to land, and land brings forth life. You're watching a universe bloom in slow motion. As Shu and Tefnut drift away to explore, Adam waits. Days, or maybe centuries, pass before they return. When they finally do, he weeps with joy. His tears fall onto the earth, and from those tears come humans. So yes, according to Egyptian myth, humanity was born from divine crying. You, me, all of us. Just a product of happy tears. Makes the phrase, "Don't cry over spilled milk," feel a little rude now. The world grows richer around you. Air thickens, mist condenses, and faint outlines of mountains and rivers shimmer into being. The Nile begins to trace its way through the landscape, a thin blue vein connecting everything. Shu lifts the sky upward, pushing it higher until it arches gracefully above the land, and Tefnut lays a veil of humidity across the air, the breath between heaven and earth. But then, something strange happens. Shu and Tefnut have children, Geb the earth, and Nut the sky. They're inseparable, pressed together in an eternal embrace. Their love is intense. So intense, in fact, that Adam, or sometimes R.A., depending on which priest was on storytelling duty, gets annoyed. He orders Shu to separate them. With gentle hands, Shu pushes Nut upward and holds her apart from Geb. You can almost hear the groan of the world stretching. Now you're standing between them. Above you, Nut arches in an endless curve, her body covered in stars. Below, Geb rumbles softly, fertile and rich. You feel the pull between them, that quiet ache of separation. Every sunset from now on will be Nut leaning down to kiss Geb goodnight. Every sunrise, her pulling away again. The whole rhythm of day and night is built on their longing. The first humans begin to appear now, walking cautiously along the banks of the newborn Nile. They build fires and look up at Nut's glittering belly with awe. They don't yet have words for gods or prayers, but they already feel something vast watching over them. One woman drops her clay bowl in surprise when a shooting star streaks across the sky. Nut stretching just a little too far in her sleep. A mainstream fact in Egyptian art, Nut is often shown swallowing the sun each evening and giving birth to it each morning. The idea of rebirth wasn't poetic. It was the literal mechanics of the cosmos. You could say the ancient Egyptians invented the world's first solar recycling program. Nearby, you notice a small, flickering temple of reeds and clay where early priests are already murmuring chants. They pour milk into the sand, hoping to feed the earth god Geb. One of them holds a carved wooden ibis, perhaps a hint of Thoth, god of wisdom, not yet born but already imagined. You watch the smoke from their incense rise, curling upward like a question toward the heavens. A quirky tidbit, in later versions of creation, Adam isn't alone. Sometimes he merges with Ra, the sun itself, sailing across the waters in a golden bark. This version inspired entire rituals about the solar egg, a cosmic yolk floating in none before hatching into light. Picture the entire universe as one gigantic sunny-side-up egg, and you'll have a surprisingly accurate metaphor. Still, the world isn't quite stable yet. There's a sense of fragility in the air, like a newly set painting that hasn't dried. At night, when you look out across the horizon, you swear you can see none still waiting beyond the borders, swirling impatient, ready to pull everything back into chaos if the gods ever stop paying attention. You sit by a small fire beside the Nile. The night hums softly, crickets, wind, distant waterbirds. You can feel the warmth of the earth under your palms, solid and alive. Somewhere above, Nut stretches again, and one of her stars falls, flickering out before it hits the ground. You can't help thinking that every grain of sand around you might have once been a piece of that first mound, the sacred earth of creation itself. The world now has shaped names, and family drama brewing among divine siblings. Tomorrow, you'll meet the sun god himself, Ra, as he begins his fiery daily commute across the sky. But for now, the air is calm, and the world is young. You breathe it in, the scent of clay, salt, and something brand new. Everything is born. Everything waits. The air feels denser now, thicker with story, warmer with light. You can almost hear the hum of energy passing between the gods, like static before a thunderstorm. The world has shape, but it isn't peaceful. Creation has barely cooled, and already the heavens and earth are arguing. You stand on the edge of the Nile Delta, feet buried in soft mud, watching a drama unfold that will make every mortal love triangle look like a polite tea party. Nut the sky, curves overhead like a sapphire dome studded with gold. Geb the earth lies beneath you, solid and heavy. Between them, the god Shu, air itself, stretches out his arms, holding them apart with an expression of divine exhaustion. He's the cosmic middleman in the universe's longest and most awkward breakup. You can feel their longing in the air. It's tangible, like humidity before rain. Every gust of wind is Geb trying to reach up to Nut. every sigh of breeze is Nut bending low to touch him. And Shu, poor Shu just stands there, keeping them apart because Ra said so. Even gods have jobs that feel like unpaid internships. Historians still argue whether Shu and Tefnut's offspring, Geb and Nut, were part of the first or second generation of gods, or whether older myths placed them differently. The story morphs depending on the temple. At Heliopolis, they were cosmic constants. In Thebes, they were almost metaphors, symbols for sky and soil. Egypt's religion wasn't one neat mythos. It was a collection of overlapping beliefs that occasionally bumped into each other like stubborn camels. You lie back on the warm sand, watching the stars shimmer along Nut's vast body. It's hard not to feel small under her. She swallows the sun at dusk, holds it in her belly through the night, and gives birth to it again every morning. Every sunrise you've ever seen, that's her labor pains. It's beautiful in a weirdly maternal celestial way. Beneath you, Geb groans softly, the deep rumble of mountains forming. Wherever he laughs, the earth quakes. Wherever he weeps, rivers carve through the sand. And when he finally exhales, the Nile floods its banks. You realize that everything alive is just an echo of these gods' emotions. Storms, crops, birth, decay. It's all divine mood swings. A mainstream fact, the Egyptians believed Geb's laughter caused earthquakes. They imagined the land itself chuckling under their feet, which, to be fair, is much more comforting than tectonic stress. Next time your coffee trembles on the table, just assume the earth is telling a joke. But even divine family life can't stay serene. Ra, the sun god, grows irritated watching Geb and Nut cling together. Their endless embrace threatens to blur the lines between heaven and earth, chaos and order. So, Ra decrees that Nut must never give birth during any day of the year. Classic power move, control time itself to stop more gods from being born. Nut, however, isn't the type to accept divine micromanagement. She seeks help from Thoth, the clever ibis-headed god of wisdom, yes, already making his cameo appearance before his big section later. Thoth, being the ultimate nerd with cosmic cheat codes, finds a loophole. He gambles with the moon for extra light, wins 5 whole days, and gifts them to Nut. These become the epigomenal days. Days outside of the regular calendar, little pockets of borrowed time. Quirky tidbit. Those 5 bonus days were considered dangerously sacred. Egyptians refused to work or start new projects during them. Think of it as the universe's built-in long weekend, except every moment buzzes with divine childbirth. On those stolen nights, Nut gives birth, 1 child per day. First comes Osiris, the green-skinned god of fertility and kingship, gentle and wise. Then Isis, the master of magic, who can speak words that twist the laws of reality. Third, Set, red-haired and tempestuous, embodiment of storms and chaos. Fourth, Nephthys, shadowed and loyal, the night's comfort. And finally, Horus the Elder, the skyhawk, whose gaze will someday become the pharaoh's symbol. Each cry of newborn divinity shakes the world a little more solid. You feel the wind stir. The sand vibrates faintly under your palms. The air smells like ozone and lotus blossoms. Creation isn't finished. It's just moving into its next Messier phase. You can almost see the divine siblings growing before your eyes, stretching from mythic infancy to radiant adulthood in the blink of a thought. Osiris stands tall, his skin a gentle green, eyes calm as the Nile after a flood. Isis moves beside him, fingers weaving invisible spells through the air, her laughter soft but dangerous. Set prowls nearby, restless, his hair wild, eyes bright with mischief, or maybe jealousy. He scuffs the earth with his heel and mutters something about never being invited to anything fun. The family dynamics are complicated. Isis loves Osiris deeply, some say from the moment they were both born. Set, however, watches them with resentment that simmers hotter than the desert noon. Even Nephthys, his twin, struggles to calm him. You sense that this divine soap opera is about to define the fate of Egypt for millennia. Historians still argue whether Set was always a villain or if that reputation came later, after political shifts made chaos unpopular. Early on, he was a necessary god, a protector of Ra's solar bark, battling serpents of darkness every night. But mythology, like politics, tends to rewrite the guest list. You walk among the gods now, invisible but present. Osiris touches the earth, and reeds spring up in his footprints. Isis speaks, and the air shimmers with power. Set stamps his foot, and thunder rolls over the horizon. Above them, Nut arches proudly, stars rippling like laughter across her body. Shu still stands between heaven and earth, stoic as ever, pretending not to hear the family bickering. The Nile flows beside you, calm and dark, reflecting the stars. You dip your fingers into it and wonder whether these divine dramas will ever stop echoing. Because even now, thousands of years later, you can still feel them in the stories of balance and chaos, of love and betrayal, of light and shadow. A warm wind brushes your cheek. Somewhere in that breeze, you hear Shu's weary sigh. Order, it whispers, always needs a little chaos to keep things interesting. You can't help but smile. It's the oldest truth in every mythology, and probably every group chat. Night deepens. The stars brighten. The gods fade slightly, their shapes dissolving back into story. You close your eyes, listening to the endless rhythm of the river and sky, and realize you're floating again, between worlds, between breaths. The stage is set. The divine family has been born. Tomorrow, the sun itself will take the spotlight, blazing across heaven and scaring the shadows into retreat. But for now, just breathe. You've survived creation and an awkward celestial custody arrangement. The first thing you feel is heat, gentle at first, then growing until it presses against your eyelids even when they're closed. You blink, and the world flares gold. The sun has risen for the first real time, no longer just a shimmering rumor over water. The light comes from a bark, an enormous boat gliding across the heavens, its sails catching not wind but radiance itself. At its helm stands Ra, the sun god, king of kings, first ruler of the world. You squint upward, and the brilliance is almost too much to bear. Ra's crown blazes like molten copper, his eyes twin sparks that could ignite the desert. Around him stand lesser gods, Ma'at, goddess of truth, featherlight and serene, and Sia and Hu, embodiments of perception and command. Together, they form the divine crew of the solar bark, steering light across the sky as mortals watch from below, shading their eyes and murmuring prayers. The world is awake now. Along the Nile, farmers kneel, scattering offerings into the water. Smoke rises from clay incense bowls, curling toward the heavens. The rhythm of life has begun. Day and night, order and chaos, flood and drought, all measured by Ra's steady passage overhead. You can almost hear the crackle of sunlight hitting stone. It's not the fierce fire of destruction. It's a steady warmth, a promise. Ra's job is relentless. Rise in the east, journey across the sky, descend into darkness, and then fight through the underworld each night to be reborn at dawn. Every sunrise is proof he survived the dangers below. A mainstream historical fact. Many temples in Egypt were aligned so that sunlight entered their sanctuaries on specific days of the year, solstices, royal birthdays, or festival dates. The light would strike the statue of Ra, or the reigning pharaoh, symbolizing the divine connection between human rule and solar power. Imagine being a priest trying to time that perfectly without a digital calendar. Ancient engineering at its most poetic. Down on Earth, you walk through a small settlement as Ra climbs higher. The people live by his rhythm. Bakers rise before dawn to catch the breath of Ra that warms their ovens. Fishermen sing his praises to keep the crocodiles sleepy. Even the children's games, little races with shadows, are tributes to the sun's chase across the ground. One old woman smiles at you as she grinds barley. Ra sees everything, she says, tapping her forehead. He keeps the world from falling apart. She points to a small clay amulet hanging above her door, a sun disk flanked by two cobras. Protection, light, renewal. The sun isn't just a star here. It's the moral compass of existence. But divine authority is never drama-free. The younger gods are restless. Osiris, wise and green, rules the fertile lands and teaches humans how to farm and govern. Isis whispers spells that heal and guide. Even Set, unpredictable as a sandstorm, serves a role, guardian of Ra's nightly voyage through the underworld. But jealousy, as always, begins to stir. You can feel it in the air, like heat lightning on the horizon. Still, for now, RA reigns supreme. You look up, and the boat's golden prow cuts through the clouds. Every hour marks a different phase of his journey. Morning youth, midday glory, evening decline. It's almost comforting, this steady cycle of burning and fading, of strength and rest. Even gods get tired. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians saw Ra and Adam as separate deities or two sides of the same solar coin. In some texts, Ra is Adam's daytime form. In others, Adam is Ra's sunset self, weary but wise. The ancient priests probably didn't lose sleep over the distinction. You suspect they were just trying to keep the theological paperwork organized. Around noon, the sun feels heavier. The sky turns white-blue, and the sand glitters so intensely you have to squint. You can see mirages forming on the horizon, palaces, rivers, trees, phantoms born from heat. The world wavers, dreamlike. You half expect a god to step straight out of the glare. And then he does. A man of impossible brightness stands on a dune ahead. His skin gleams like gold leaf. His beard, finely braided, seems woven from sunlight. When he speaks, the sound is like distant thunder, softened by warmth. "You walk my path," he says, not unkindly. The road of the sun is long, and the shadows are patient. You want to ask him how he endures it, rising, shining, dying, fighting through darkness every single day. But Ra only smiles. "The light must fall," he says, "so that it can rise again." He gestures, and for a heartbeat you see the world through his eyes. Every leaf trembling with energy, every heartbeat glowing faintly in the dark. Then he steps backward into the brilliance and is gone. A quirky tidbit. Egyptians believed the sun's disk itself was a separate deity called Khepri during morning hours, a scarab beetle pushing the sun across the sky. You can still find tiny scarab amulets buried with mummies, hoping to guarantee their rebirth each dawn. Imagine waking up every morning and thinking, "Thank you, giant bug god, for another Tuesday." As the afternoon fades, you drift toward a temple rising near the riverbank. Its columns are carved with scenes of Ra defeating a serpent, the monstrous Apep. Each night in the underworld, the priests chant the litany of the sun, voices echoing off the sandstone. You stand in the doorway, watching light spill through the entrance like liquid fire. For a second, it looks as though the sun itself bows before its worshippers. The shadows lengthen. Birds settle on the reeds. The air cools, soft and violet. Ra begins his descent. You can feel the change in temperature, like the world taking a long breath out. Farmers gather their tools. Fishermen tie their boats. Mothers call their children indoors. Night doesn't just bring darkness, it brings risk. Everyone knows what happens when the sun leaves the sky. Still, the sunset is beautiful. The disk glows red, sliding toward the edge of the world. Nut stretches across the horizon, ready to swallow Ra into her belly, to carry him safely through the night. You watch until the last sliver of gold disappears, and the first stars appear. The gods bark sails into shadow. Down below, torches flicker. Somewhere, priests are already beginning their midnight rituals, whispering words to help Ra fight through the underworld serpents and demons. You'll follow him there soon, but not yet. For now, the cool night wind brushes your face, and the world exhales into peace. The first day of the sun is complete. The balance holds. The stars shimmer like promises across Nut's dark skin, and the river hums softly beside you. You close your eyes and let the warmth still lingering on your skin fade into memory. Ra will rise again. He always does. The stars above you begin to flicker, not like candles, but like thoughts forming. It's the deep hour when the desert seems to hold its breath. You're still half dreaming, floating between night and dawn, when a whisper ripples across the sand. It's a woman's voice, calm, deliberate, and dangerous in that way wisdom sometimes is. The air around you warms faintly, perfumed with lotus and something metallic, like hidden power. You know that tone before you even see her. Isis has arrived. She doesn't glow like Ra or tower like Shu. She moves quietly, wrapped in moonlight and patience. Her crown, throne-shaped, gleams softly in the starlight. The way she looks at you makes you feel simultaneously seen and dissected, like she's reading the invisible hieroglyphs in your mind. This is the goddess of magic, motherhood, and cunning. 3 job titles that, honestly, sound identical once you think about it. You follow her footsteps along the riverbank. She's walking with purpose, murmuring words that seem to rearrange the air. Her goal? A secret no one's ever supposed to know, the hidden name of Ra. Now, names in Egypt aren't just labels, they're levers. To know someone's true name is to hold a piece of their essence. You could call it divine hacking. Say the right word, and reality obeys. Ra, of course, guards his true name carefully. He's ruled for ages, his light unwavering, his power unmatched. But lately, he's been tired. You've noticed it too. The sun doesn't burn as bright at noon, and dusk seems to come earlier each day. Age, even for gods, has a way of creeping in. One morning, as Ra sails his bark across the sky, his sweat drips onto the earth. Isis, ever watchful, collects a few drops of that divine perspiration, divine DNA, essentially, and mixes it with dust. From that blend, she shapes a small serpent. It slithers silently onto the path where Ra will pass, gleaming faintly in the sunlight. When the serpent strikes, Ra cries out, and the heavens shake. The sun wobbles in its course, shadows race across the desert, and the gods panic. What creature has done this? Ra demands, his voice trembling with pain. The poison burns through him like fire, and none of the other gods can cure it. That's when Isis steps forward, feigning concern. "Mighty Ra," she says softly, "tell me your secret name, and I will speak the words to banish the poison." You can practically hear Set snort in the background. He's the only one bold enough to roll his eyes at cosmic blackmail. Ra hesitates. He recites a dozen of his titles: Creator, Flame, Eye of Heaven, but none of them satisfy Isis. "No," she says. "Your true name, the one hidden inside your heart." The poison surges. The sun falters. Finally, in agony, Ra whispers his secret into her ear. His power flows into her like molten gold. Instantly, she chants the cure, and the serpent's venom evaporates. Ra recovers, but weaker. Isis bows, outwardly humble, inwardly triumphant. Historians still argue whether this story was meant as a metaphor for the rising influence of priestesses and magic in Egypt's later dynasties, or simply as a tale warning that even kings should fear clever women. Either way, it's one of history's earliest lessons in don't underestimate the quiet ones. You stand beside Isis as dawn begins to form, a pale bruise on the horizon. Her face glows faintly in the half-light. You can sense her satisfaction, but also restraint. She doesn't abuse her new power. Instead, she keeps Ra's true name locked inside her, a secret so potent it could unmake the world if spoken carelessly. That's the strange balance of Isis, ruthless intellect, tempered by love. A mainstream fact to ground you. Temples of Isis eventually spread far beyond Egypt, into Greece, Rome, even Britain. Centuries after pharaohs were dust, sailors still prayed to her for safe voyages. Her worship outlived nearly every other Egyptian deity, proving that cleverness and compassion have a longer shelf life than lightning bolts. You walk with her through the fields as the first rays of the sun break over the horizon. She moves among the farmers unnoticed, blending in like an ordinary woman. Her magic hums beneath her skin, subtle but unending. She kneels to touch a stalk of barley, whispering words that make it stand taller. The people don't know she's a goddess. They just think their crops love her. A quirky tidbit. Some ancient recipes for love charms claim to invoke Isis by mixing honey, crocodile dung, and myrrh. Not exactly something you'd find in a modern self-help book, but apparently it worked for them. The Egyptians believed the smell alone could summon devotion, or at least clear the room. You pause near the river, watching sunlight shimmer on the water. Somewhere, Ra's bark glides again, slower than before but steady. You wonder if he still resents Isis, or if he secretly admires her cunning. After all, she didn't overthrow him. She simply reminded him that even gods need to share their power. The world feels subtly different now. The air hums with possibility. You can almost taste the magic in it, like a faint electric sweetness. Isis's trick didn't just change the hierarchy of heaven, it changed the rules. Knowledge became power, and power became something anyone could learn, not just inherit. The day grows hotter. You see priests emerging from temples, carrying small sun discs and bowls of oil. They chant Ra's praises, completely unaware that his secret name now lives in another's keeping. The irony makes you smile. Somewhere in the shadows, Isis watches too, her expression unreadable. Night will come again soon, and Ra will descend into the underworld to face his endless battle. But now, thanks to Isis, the balance of power has tilted just enough to keep things interesting. You take one last look at the sky. Gold at the edges, soft blue at its heart. The serpent's tracks have vanished, the dust blown away by morning wind. Yet you can still feel the echo of that whispered name vibrating through the air. The gods keep their secrets. But tonight, you've learned how one of them learned hers. By now, the desert air feels heavier, like the weight of secrets pressing against your skin. The sunlight shimmers on the sand, and somewhere far away, the faint roar of water breaks the stillness. You turn toward it, toward the place where the Nile's calm current hides its most ancient danger. The water darkens, ripples widen, and just beneath the surface, something enormous stirs. At first, it looks like a ridge of mud, or maybe a half-submerged log. But then the log moves, eyes gleaming, jaws glistening, and the shape resolves into the monstrous body of Sobek, the crocodile god. His scales shimmer like wet bronze. His teeth are the color of moonlight on bone. And his grin, well, let's just say it's not the comforting kind. You freeze, watching him lumber out of the river. Every movement sends droplets of water scattering like diamonds. He's massive, ancient, and completely unbothered by the mortals who scatter from the banks. To the Egyptians, he's both protector and predator, because of course the god of the Nile would have mood swings. The same water that feeds the land can drown it, and Sobek is that contradiction given scales. He looks right at you, and you feel that primal instinct kick in, the one that says, "Don't move, maybe he won't see you." Spoiler, he definitely sees you. But instead of charging, he settles onto the sand, his heavy tail curling like a lazy cat's. He's basking, because even gods appreciate a good sunbeam. Sobek's domain is the Nile, the artery of Egypt, the giver of life. Without it, the entire civilization would be nothing but a whisper in the dunes. Farmers prayed to him during the flood season, hoping for gentle waters, not the kind that washed away their crops. Soldiers also wore his amulets, believing his ferocity would make them fearless in battle. Historians still argue whether his cult began as pure fear worship or as respect for the ecosystem's most terrifying resident. Honestly, both sound pretty reasonable. You sit nearby, careful not to make sudden moves. The air smells faintly of river mud and lotus, with just a hint of something sharp, like ozone before a storm. Sobek's eyes half close, and for a moment, he seems almost peaceful. You realize this is a god who doesn't pretend to be anything but what he is. Appetite, strength, and survival. A mainstream fact to ground the moment. The city of Crocodilopolis, yes, that was the actual name, was the center of Sobek's worship. There, priests raised and mummified real crocodiles, adorning them with jewelry and burying them in sacred pools. Archaeologists have found hundreds of them, perfectly wrapped and preserved, proving that even Egypt's most feared creatures were granted eternity. Sobek stirs again, snapping his jaws once, the sound echoing like thunder. You flinch, but he isn't attacking. He's telling a story. His voice is deep and slow, rumbling like a river beneath rock. He speaks of the time the world nearly drowned, when the Nile overflowed beyond its banks, threatening to wash Egypt clean. In that age, he says, mortals forgot gratitude. They took the Nile's generosity for granted, boasting of their crops and wealth. So Sobek, offended, let the waters rise. For 7 nights and 7 days, the flood consumed fields, homes, and temples. Then, seeing the people humbled, he relented, guiding the current back to its path. From that day, they left offerings of milk and bread by the riverbank, whispering apologies to the water. There's a quirky tidbit here, too. Ancient Egyptian women once used crocodile dung mixed with honey as an early form of contraceptive. Supposedly, Sobek's strength would block conception. You can't help but laugh quietly. Ancient science was bold, if not exactly pleasant-smelling. The irony that Sobek, the god of fertility and virility, was also tied to birth control is the kind of cosmic humor the Egyptians excelled at. Sobek's tail swishes through the sand, drawing a long curve that points toward the horizon. "Ra sails above," he rumbles, "but I keep the waters below. Balance must remain." His gaze lingers on you, and you realize that beneath his monstrous exterior lies something strangely paternal. The Nile's fury, yes, but also its patience. He lowers his head, nostrils steaming slightly in the afternoon heat. Flies buzz around him, but never land, as if even insects know better. You hear other gods' names whispered in the distance: Isis, Horus, Anubis, but Sobek doesn't flinch. He's not part of their drama. His loyalty is to the water, to the ceaseless cycle of flood and drought. You reach out, just slightly, your hand hovering above the rough scales of his back. The air hums with old magic. It feels like touching the pulse of Egypt itself. Beneath your fingertips, you sense the weight of every harvest, every funeral barge, every offering tossed into the river for luck. Sobek may not be loved like Isis or feared like Set, but without him, none of it survives. The god opens one golden eye. "The Nile remembers everything," he says, voice half growl, half whisper. "Even you." That thought sits heavy in your mind. You imagine every drop of water that's ever passed through Egypt still holding fragments of prayer, laughter, and regret. Maybe Sobek's strength comes not from violence, but from memory, from knowing that life and death are just tides that keep returning. The sun slides lower, painting the river in ribbons of red and gold. Sobek sinks back beneath the surface, disappearing without a ripple. The water goes calm again, innocent as glass. For a long time, you sit by the bank, half expecting him to resurface. But he doesn't. Instead, you notice something small and almost ridiculous: a frog perched on a lily pad, croaking proudly into the silence. And somehow, that simple sound feels like Sobek's farewell, life continuing, no matter what gods rise or fall. You stretch, the warmth of the sand seeping into your bones. The crocodile god may have vanished, but his presence lingers, like the thrum of blood in your veins. The Nile flows on, unhurried, eternal. And you realize you've stopped fearing the dark beneath the water. You've started respecting it instead. Evening seeps into the desert like ink poured into honey. Slow, thick, and beautiful. The horizon glows orange, fading to violet, and you can feel the air cool against your skin. The Nile, calm after Sobek's stirring, glints like a serpent of silver. You trace its winding path toward the west, where the sun lowers into its nightly grave. Somewhere beyond the glowing line lies a darker realm, the underworld, the Duat, and its keeper waits patiently for the dead. Anubis greets you there. He stands motionless at first, tall and lean, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. The head of a black jackal sits atop a body wrapped in linen and darkness. His eyes gleam faintly gold, not with malice, but with precision, like the glint of a knife about to perform delicate work. When he turns toward you, you realize something strange. You don't feel fear. You feel order. Quiet, as if even death, under his supervision, becomes something well-managed and oddly polite. He gestures for you to follow, and the desert floor beneath your feet begins to slope downward. The world shifts from sand to shadow, from wind to silence. You pass through a gate carved with hieroglyphs, and beyond it lies a place that feels neither alive nor dead, just still. The scent of incense and embalming oils drifts in the air, thick and sweet. You walk beside Anubis as he moves among the dead. He doesn't speak at first. He's focused, adjusting the linen wrappings of a mummy with the care of a surgeon, or maybe a mother tucking in her child. "The body must be preserved," he finally says, voice low and even, "so the soul knows where to return." It's not exactly a comforting line, but it makes sense. To the Egyptians, death wasn't an end. It was a long layover before eternity. They believed your spirit, the Ka, would need its body as an anchor, and Anubis was the one who ensured that anchor didn't fall apart mid-journey. Historians still argue whether Anubis started as the supreme god of the dead before Osiris took the title. Some say he was demoted when funerary practices became more centralized under Osiris's cult. Others think he just didn't care about status. After all, who else would want to spend eternity surrounded by corpses? Someone's got to do it. You watch him work. His hands are efficient, even elegant. He uses long bronze hooks to remove what shouldn't remain, then carefully fills the body with resins and linen. It's clinical, yes, but also reverent. No gore, just ritual. The process is slow, like meditation. At one point, he looks at you, and his jackal muzzle tilts slightly in what might be amusement. You humans fear decay, he murmurs. But you forget, it is only transformation. A shiver slides down your spine, though not from cold. You realize he's right. The smell of the oils is strange, but not unpleasant: cinnamon, cedar, and something earthy, like ancient dust and myrrh. It's a scent that feels older than fear itself. He leads you deeper into his temple, where tall statues line the walls. Each bears a different expression, some calm, some stern, some almost pitying. You notice a scale in the center of the chamber. It gleams under torchlight, and beside it lies a single feather. Anubis touches it lightly. The feather of Ma'at, he says. Truth. You swallow. You know what comes next. A mainstream fact to steady your mind. According to Egyptian belief, every soul must stand before Osiris, while Anubis weighs its heart against this feather. If your heart is lighter, you're granted paradise in the field of reeds, a lush version of Egypt where crops never fail. But if it's heavier, well, Amit, the crocodile-lion-hippo hybrid waiting nearby, gets a snack. Efficient system. Anubis motions for you to place your hand on your chest. You do, and for a moment, you feel the faint pulse of your own heart echoing in the stillness. It beats faster under his gaze. Your heart tells the truth even when your mouth lies, he says. Remember that. He sets the feather gently on the scale, then lifts something unseen, a small glowing orb that pulses like light trapped in amber. You realize, with a slow chill, that it's meant to be your heart. You don't resist. You just watch. The scale tilts slightly. The feather trembles, but doesn't rise or fall. Balance. Anubis inclines his head, satisfied. You walk between guilt and grace, he murmurs. That is where most of life happens. You exhale. Somehow, that judgment feels fairer than any human one. He gestures toward the far end of the chamber, where a mural covers the wall. It shows the journey of the sun through the underworld, our ace sailing through darkness, battling chaos serpents, and being reborn each dawn. You'll see this path again, Anubis says softly. We all do. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind as you watch the mural. Ancient embalmers sometimes placed onion slices over the eyes of the dead to keep them open to the light. It's such a human detail, half sweet and half absurd, like trying to trick eternity into kindness. Anubis chuckles, yes, chuckles, when you think that. Maybe he heard your thought. Maybe he's just amused by how humans always try to domesticate death with little rituals and spices. When you step back toward the surface, the torches flicker out behind you one by one, until only Anubis remains visible, bathed in shadow. His voice follows you, low and steady. You will die one day, but not tonight. The desert wind greets you again, cool and dry. The stars above seem brighter, sharper. Somewhere in the darkness, a jackal howls, one long, mournful note that fades into silence. You realize you're no longer afraid of the night, because after walking beside the god who measures hearts, the dark feels like just another room in a very large house. The sand feels softer under your feet now, as though even the desert is catching its breath after the underworld's chill. You walk beneath a sky powdered with stars, their light thin and pale, like salt scattered across black silk. Somewhere far off, you can hear drums, slow, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. They lead you toward the next chapter of this dream, one steeped in moonlight and mirrors. You crest a dune, and there she is. Standing at the water's edge, tall and luminous, is Hathor, the goddess of joy, beauty, and music. She's crowned with a golden sun disk cradled between cow horns, a symbol both gentle and immense. Her laughter carries across the dunes, light as bells. And for the first time tonight, the air doesn't feel heavy with divine tension. It feels happy. "Come closer," she says, her voice lilting like a song half remembered. "You've seen too much death for one night." You obey, of course. Everyone does. Her temple stands nearby, glowing faintly from within. The sound of sistrums, those handheld rattles the priestesses use, fills the air. The rhythm vibrates in your ribs, tickling your bones. People dance here, even in the dark. Their shadows whirl across the sand, long and liquid, like brushstrokes of joy. You feel yourself smiling without meaning to. It's impossible not to around Hathor. She was worshipped as the Eye of Ra once, fierce and radiant, but she chose a softer path, one of laughter, wine, and love songs. Yet that sweetness hides an old fire. Historians still argue whether Hathor and Sekhmet are two sides of the same goddess, the nurturing mother and the lioness of rage. Some stories claim that when humanity rebelled against Ra, he sent his daughter Sekhmet to punish them. But when her bloodlust nearly destroyed the world, she was tricked into drinking beer dyed red to look like blood. She fell asleep and awoke gentle, transformed into Hathor, the ultimate cosmic hangover. She catches your smirk. "You've heard that one," she says knowingly, twirling her sistrum. "I don't remember it quite that way. I was never cruel. I was simply thorough." You can't tell if she's joking or warning you. Maybe both. Inside the temple, the air is thick with incense and laughter. Statues of Hathor in both human and cow-headed form line the hall. Gold leaf glimmers on the walls. Music echoes softly between the columns. This isn't a place for mourning. It's a refuge from it. A mainstream fact grounds your wandering thoughts. Hathor's temples were among the most decorated in Egypt, especially Dendra's. There, priests celebrated her festivals with processions, feasting, and endless songs. Her cult became so beloved that Greek visitors later identified her with Aphrodite. The universal truth, it seems, is that every culture needs a goddess of good vibes. Hathor hands you a small cup. The liquid inside gleams like melted amber. "Drink," she says, smiling. "It's not wine tonight. It's memory." You hesitate, then sip. It tastes like honey and salt, sweet at first, but ending on something sharp, something alive. Images flash behind your eyelids, fields in bloom, lovers embracing, children laughing by the river. Then, briefly, flashes of war, grief, and loss. The drink is life distilled, messy, beautiful, complete. When you open your eyes, Hathor is watching you carefully. You see, even sorrow feeds joy, she murmurs. Without both, the music stops. Her words linger like the aftertaste of that strange drink. You realize this is what she rules over. Not just happiness, but balance. The soft hand that steadies a shaking heart. The laugh that breaks tension before it shatters you. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. In some Egyptian households, mirrors were dedicated to Hathor. They weren't just grooming tools. They were portals of beauty, reminders that reflection itself was sacred. You imagine ancient women whispering small prayers before their polished bronze mirrors. "May I see myself as Hathor sees me." The world's first self-affirmations, maybe. The drums grow louder, and you feel the pulse in your chest sync with them. The temple dancers swirl faster, their movements blurring into waves of color and gold. Hathor joins them, her laughter spilling into the air like perfume. Even the columns seem to sway with the rhythm. Then she turns to you again, her expression softening. "But beauty fades," she says quietly. "Even mine." Her gaze flicks toward the moon reflected in the Nile, bright but trembling on the water's surface. The trick is to keep dancing anyway. For a moment you see it. The weight beneath her mirth, the timeless fatigue of being the one expected to smile for eternity. You understand why her laughter sometimes sounds a little like a sigh. Still, she lifts her sistrum again, shaking it once more. The metallic shimmer fills the silence like starlight. "Come," she says. "Move with me. You're not exactly temple-trained, but you try." The sand shifts under your feet, cool and forgiving. The rhythm takes you. Hathor's presence is warm, magnetic. Every movement becomes easier until it feels like floating, like breathing in sync with the night itself. Somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, the temple melts away. The music becomes the wind. The scent of incense becomes the desert air. You're still dancing, but now under a sky so wide it swallows thought. Hathor's form flickers, becoming both woman and cow, light and darkness, laughter and silence. She leans close, whispering, "Remember this. The gods may fade, but joy never does." Then she's gone. You stand there, the last echoes of her music, fading into the dunes. Your pulse slows. You realize your shoulders are lighter, your breath deeper. The world hasn't changed, but you have. You look up at the stars. For a second, they seem to blink brighter, as if in applause. The music of Hathor's temple fades into the hush of night, and with it, the soft warmth of joy recedes. You wander once more along the edge of the Nile, guided by a flickering torch and the whisper of wind through reeds. The river gleams like liquid obsidian, carrying the reflection of stars that look close enough to touch. You think of the dance you just shared, of laughter and honeyed wine, but the air shifts now. It thickens, darker, heavier, as if the world is drawing in a deep breath. The scent of incense gives way to something faintly metallic, and in that quiet, you hear a voice, deep, deliberate, like the slow turning of stone. "Joy is a spark," it says, "but truth is the flame." From the shadows steps a tall figure draped in pale linen. His skin glows faintly blue, like moonlight on limestone. His features are calm, carved with the patience of centuries, and across his chest gleams a necklace of lapis and gold that glows faintly with every breath he takes. This is Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and time's quiet bookkeeping. You've seen paintings of him before, the ibis-headed scribe, pen and scroll in hand. But here, standing before you, he feels less like a scholar and more like a clockmaker of the cosmos. You half expect to hear gears turning somewhere in the silence. "Come," he says, his long fingers curling around a reed pen. "It's time to remember what the world forgot." He leads you into a cavern lined with papyrus scrolls. The walls themselves shimmer faintly with etched hieroglyphs, as if every grain of stone remembers something. The air hums softly, alive with a low buzz of magic. You realize each word written here is a fragment of power, every syllable capable of shaping or unmaking reality. A mainstream fact to ground this dizzying scene. The Egyptians credited Thoth with inventing writing itself, Mita Nedjer, the words of the gods. Scribes prayed to him before setting pen to papyrus, believing that each mark carried divine consequence. He was the patron of logic, science, and moonlight, the thinking kind of illumination. Thoth moves between the scrolls, with the quiet efficiency of someone who has lived through every era twice. "I keep the balance," he murmurs, "between order and chaos, between speech and silence." His voice seems to echo without sound, directly in your thoughts. He pauses before a long table, unrolling a fresh sheet of papyrus. The script upon it glows faintly gold. You lean closer and realize it's your own name written there, surrounded by hundreds of tiny hieroglyphs. Thoth notices your startled expression. "Every thought you've ever had," he says, "has already been written." That's unsettling, but also kind of poetic. You ask what happens if someone writes something new, something not in the scrolls. He smiles, just a little. Then, he says, the scroll rewrites itself. Historians still argue whether Thoth's legend as the keeper of divine writing inspired the later Greek figure Hermes Trismegistus, whose teachings birthed the Hermetic tradition. Magic, alchemy, and early science all trace faint lines back to him. It's as if Thoth never stopped writing. He just switched languages over the millennia. He sits at the table and begins to write. You watch as the nib of his pen scratches symbols that glow briefly before sinking into the page. Every day, he explains, Ra sails across the sky. Every night, he descends into darkness. I record it all. The victories, the losses, the breaths between. He glances up at you. Even the stories you tell about us, I write those too. You blink. Even bedtime stories. The faintest smirk curls his beak. Especially those. A quirky tidbit flutters into your memory. Ancient Egyptian scribes often licked their reed pens before dipping them in ink, believing it would draw Thoth's wisdom into their words. Considering how papyrus ink was made from soot and honey, that's either devotion or dietary recklessness. Thoth gestures toward a nearby wall, where glowing lines ripple like water. They form an image, Ra's solar bark sailing through the underworld, battling the serpent Apep. Every night, Thoth says softly, Ra faces chaos. And every dawn, I mark that he survived. Balance must be recorded to exist. He steps closer, eyes bright beneath his ibis crown. But balance, he adds, is not peace. It's maintenance. The words echo in your mind, lingering long after he turns back to his scrolls. You realize he's describing not just cosmic truth, but life itself, the constant juggling act between light and dark, creation and decay, joy and sorrow. You glance around the chamber, at the thousands of scrolls glowing faintly in the half-light. Some seem to whisper as you pass. One scroll rustles open slightly, revealing a few glowing lines. You can't resist. You read them. They tell a story about a traveler walking beside the gods, learning their secrets under the desert stars. The handwriting is unmistakable. You realize Thoth is writing this story, your story, right now. You look back at him. He doesn't deny it. You are ink, he says simply, that remembers being breath. Something about that feels oddly comforting. Maybe it's the idea that memory and life are one and the same, that as long as someone remembers you, you're never entirely gone. The air grows softer. The glow from the scrolls fades to a gentle pulse, like a heartbeat at rest. Thoth places the final mark on the page, then rolls it shut. The world spins on words, he murmurs. Use them kindly. You feel a light touch on your forehead, cool and weightless. When you open your eyes again, the scrolls are gone. The cavern walls have melted into moonlight, and Thoth himself is fading into the shimmer. Keep walking. His voice echoes faintly. There are more gods yet awake. And then you're standing once more beneath the open sky, your feet sinking into soft sand. The moon overhead looks fuller now, almost like an eye watching. Somewhere in the distance, a heron glides silently over the Nile, its wings silver in the dark. You take a deep breath. The night feels different now, clearer, quieter, as if the world itself has just finished writing a sentence and is waiting for you to read it aloud. The moonlight over the Nile deepens to a silvery hush. The desert wind carries whispers of reeds and salt, and something else, a rhythm like footsteps coming from the east. You turn toward it, expecting another god cloaked in grandeur, but what approaches is smaller, stranger. A black cat pads out from the dunes, tail held high, eyes gleaming like 2 drops of molten amber. She regards you as though you've entered her temple uninvited, which, considering where you are, might actually be true. When she speaks, her voice is silk laid over steel. You've walked among joy and wisdom, she says. Now walk with protection. You blink. You're Baret, she says simply, the goddess of cats, of home, of fierce affection. The Egyptians loved her in a way no other deity could quite match. She was both mother and huntress, healer and warrior, the soft paw that hid the claws. Her temples overflowed with bronze cat statues, and her festivals were said to shake the earth with music and wine. As you follow her, the desert opens into a city alive with torchlight and laughter. Bubastis, her sacred city, unfolds before you, its streets lined with banners and gold. You can smell roasted fish, lotus perfume, the tang of beer poured in libation. Music spirals through the night, sistrums rattling, drums thundering, flutes shrilling like desert birds. Everywhere you look, there are cats, sleek, striped golden black, curling between dancers' feet, perched on shrine walls, watching the crowd with regal patience. Batet moves through the celebration like smoke, her feline grace unbroken even as revelers swirl around her. Do you see? She says, gesturing toward the dancers. Protection is not fear. It's love fiercely guarded. It's an odd kind of wisdom, half warmth, half warning. And you realize how her worship blurred the line between devotion and delight. Ancient accounts say that during her festival, Thousands would sail to Bubastis on boats filled with song and laughter, women shaking sistrums and shouting her name. When they reached her temple, they shed tears of joy. It was less pilgrimage and more release, a collective sigh of gratitude to the goddess who kept their home safe. Once, Batet murmurs, I was a lioness. You glance up. Her form flickers, cat, woman, lion, flame, and then settles again into her smaller, familiar shape. Before peace, she says, there must be fury. A bit of context surfaces in your memory. In older myths, Batet and Sekhmet were two sides of the same being. Sekhmet was the lioness of war, the scourge of Ra, unleashed to punish humanity. Batet was the gentler incarnation, still fierce, but tempered by mercy. The Egyptians believed the world needed both, wrath to cleanse, tenderness to heal. She leads you through the festival until you reach the great temple, its pillars painted with cat-headed goddesses holding ankh scepters. At the base of the steps, a priestess kneels beside a small altar, feeding a bowl of milk to a real cat that sits like royalty, licking slowly, eyes half shut in bliss. Batet watches, pleased. They understand, she says softly. They love what they protect. She turns her gaze to you then, and her tone sharpens, the silk giving way to the blade beneath. And you, what do you guard? You hesitate. The desert wind dances for you, stirring your hair, cool and searching. Your story, she says, as if reading your thoughts. You guard your story. That's good. There's a pulse of light around her, subtle at first, then brighter, until her fur gleams like polished obsidian. But know this, she adds. Every guardian must someday bear their claws. You remember something Thoth said. That balance isn't peace, it's maintenance. And here, in Bastet's gleaming eyes, you see the other half of that truth. Protection isn't stillness, it's vigilance. In the temple, the priestesses begin a dance, slow, spiraling, cat-like. They weave through incense smoke, their bracelets chiming like soft laughter. Bata joins them, her body flickering with divine shimmer. For a moment she's everywhere, among the dancers, among the shadows, among the watching cats. The air itself seems to purr. A historical curiosity surfaces like driftwood in your mind. Archaeologists once uncovered a vast cat necropolis at Saqqara, containing hundreds of thousands of mummified cats. Some were wrapped in linen and placed in small wooden coffins, shaped like felines. Each one, a silent offering to Batet. Even in death, she whispers, they remember me. The words hum through the air, vibrating deep in your ribs. You realize she's not just talking about cats. She's talking about devotion, how memory itself is a kind of protection. The dance slows. The festival noise fades to a heartbeat rhythm. Batet steps close, her eyes glinting with both warmth and warning. Remember this, she says. Joy without vigilance becomes weakness, but vigilance without joy becomes cruelty. Walk between them. She presses her forehead against your hand. Her fur is impossibly soft, warm as the first light of dawn. Then she pulls back, her form already dissolving into shimmer and shadow. As she fades, a small golden amulet remains where she stood, a cat seated, one paw raised. You pick it up. It's warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, as if it contains a heartbeat of its own. You hang it around your neck. The desert air changes, lighter, safer somehow. The stars seem to watch over you more kindly. Behind you, the laughter of Bubastis drifts away on the wind, mingling with the rustle of reeds and the soft, distant sound of a purr that never quite ends. And when you look down, there's a single paw print in the sand beside yours. You follow that paw print until it fades into the sand, and for a while, the desert is quiet again. The stars will lazily above, and you catch yourself wondering, where do the gods go when no one's looking? Maybe they don't vanish at all. Maybe they just step sideways into another story. The silence stretches until, faintly, you hear the lapping of water again. The Nile has returned, winding through moonlight like a serpent half asleep. And that's when you sense it, a new kind of presence. Not the warmth of Hathor or the playfulness of Batet, but something heavier, vast and slow. You glance toward the horizon. There, a dark shape glides through the water. At first you think it's a rock, then a shadow, and then you realize it's moving against the current. The ripples shimmer red in its wake, though the moon above is white. You've met the sun's protectors, the moon's dancers, even the scribes of balance. Now it's time for the monster that tries to end it all every single night. Meet Apep, also called Apophis, the great serpent of chaos. The water churns as the creature rises, coils as thick as temple pillars, scales gleaming like oil on fire. His mouth yawns open, a black pit lined with teeth the size of tomb doors. And in that cavernous silence between breaths, you hear it, the sound of hunger that has no end. You shouldn't be here, a voice says behind you. You turn. Ra's solar bark glides into view, golden and radiant even in this dreamscape. The god himself stands aboard, crowned with the sun disk, his hawk eyes fierce and unblinking. Behind him, familiar figures Set, the warlike defender, Thoth, the calm strategist, and a host of lesser deities gripping spears of light. Every night, they sail through the underworld to ensure dawn returns. And every night, Apep waits to swallow them whole. Get down, Ra says, as the serpent lunges. The bark tilts, light flashing as spears fly. The air hums with divine power. You can almost feel the collision of order and chaos, the clash that's kept the cosmos spinning since the first sunrise. Historians still argue whether Apep was truly worshipped or simply feared. Some texts call him a necessary force, the counterweight to creation itself. Others insist he was pure evil, the embodiment of unmaking. But whatever he was, everyone agreed. Without him, there'd be no dawn to fight for. You crouch low on the sand as Apep roars, his voice shaking the stars. Ra's bark gleams brighter, pushing forward. Lightning crackles, where the serpent's fangs meet the god shield of light. And then, just as the tension peaks, you hear laughter. Deep, defiant, unmistakable. Set stands at the prow, wielding a spear that glows like molten bronze. You again, he shouts at Apep, grinning. Haven't you learned to stay dead yet? With a roar, he leaps, driving the spear down into the serpent's side. The impact sends shockwaves through the water, spraying mist that glitters like shattered glass. The beast thrashes, coils churning up waves the size of dunes. A mainstream fact surfaces amid the chaos. In Egyptian belief, priests helped Ra's nightly battle by reciting spells and crushing small wax models of Apep. Each ritual symbolized humanity's contribution to cosmic order, tiny acts of defiance against the endless dark. You can almost hear those chants now, echoing faintly through the night. Fall, serpent of chaos, be bound by Ma'at. It's strange, really. The gods are immortal, yet every night they must fight to survive until sunrise. Even perfection needs maintenance. Ra's light flares one final time, spearing through the serpent's open jaws. Apep shrieks, a sound that seems to tear the horizon in two, and then implodes into black mist. The water stills. The night breathes again. Set lands back on the deck, dripping, panting, and grinning like someone who just arm-wrestled death for fun. Told you I'd handle it, he mutters, wiping his hands. Ra glares. Until tomorrow night, he says dryly. You almost laugh, but you're too busy noticing the horizon changing. The first blush of dawn touches the Nile, bleeding pink and gold across the water. Ra steps forward, raising his hands. The solar disk glows brighter, rising from the horizon like a burning crown. It's almost comforting, the rhythm of it all. Chaos comes. Order rises. Repeat forever. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Egyptians sometimes wore amulets depicting Ra's bark triumphing over Apep. They weren't just jewelry, they were cosmic participation trophies, reminders that every sunrise was a shared victory. Ra looks down at you as the bark passes overhead. You've seen enough of my war, he says, voice deep as thunder but kind at its edges. Go back to the land. Tell them the sun rises because we never stop fighting for it. The light envelopes you, warm and blinding. When it fades, you're standing once more on the desert shore. The water glimmers peacefully. No trace of serpent or struggle. Only the first true morning in what feels like an eternity. You realize how fragile it all is. How every dawn, every breath, is borrowed from chaos. And yet here it stands, steadfast and shining. The wind rustles through the reeds beside you. Somewhere far away, a rooster crows, as if joining in the celebration of another successful sunrise. You stretch, yawning, feeling the tension of the night uncoil from your shoulders. The amulet Batet gave you glints against your chest, warm from the new sun. Behind you, the desert yawns open, vast and endless as time. Ahead, the light spills over the Nile in waves of molten gold. You take a breath, deep and slow. Another night survived, another dawn earned. The sunlight warms your face as the Nile gleams like a golden ribbon, unspooling between green banks and palm shadows. You blink, still half in that dream where gods fought in starlight, half in this calm morning that smells faintly of wet earth and lotus. Somewhere birds cry, a clear, sharp sound that feels almost too alive after so much darkness. You take a slow step forward, letting your toes sink into the damp sand. The warmth of RA lingers, but already the air hums with another presence, older, quieter, and far more deliberate. The rhythm of footsteps not in haste, but in procession. You follow it until you see her, a figure draped in linen white as bone, walking along the riverbank with a grace that seems rehearsed over centuries. She's tall, regal, her face half hidden by a veil of gauze. At her side, she carries a reed scepter tipped with an ostrich feather. You know her before she speaks. Everyone does, even if they've never said her name aloud. Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. The principle that keeps everything from unraveling. You've seen the sun rise again, she says softly, her voice like wind brushing papyrus leaves. Now, you must remember why it matters. You nod, though you're not sure she expects an answer. Her presence is both calming and terrifying. She feels less like a person and more like gravity given form. She gestures toward the water, where her reflection ripples, a woman crowned with her feather, eyes steady as carved stone. Without balance, she murmurs, Ra's victory would mean nothing. Chaos would creep in again. It always does. You remember that feather, how it waits in every Egyptian heart's final trial, placed on one side of the scales against the soul's weight. If your heart is heavier, burdened with lies and cruelty, it's devoured by Ammit, the crocodile-lion-hippo hybrid waiting nearby. It's an image that never quite leaves you. Historians still argue whether Ma'at was ever worshipped like a traditional deity or simply lived through, a guiding law embodied rather than adored. Pharaohs claimed to uphold Ma'at. Priests swore by her name, and even the humblest farmer might say he walked in Ma'at after paying his debts fairly. A mainstream fact. The concept of Ma'at shaped every Egyptian court, from the smallest village dispute to royal decrees. Justice wasn't just legality, it was harmony. To lie was to wound the universe. Truth is not convenience, she says, pausing to look at you. It's courage. You feel seen, and it's uncomfortable, like she's weighing something invisible between you. She turns toward a nearby field where workers are plowing the earth. Their laughter carries on the breeze. They live because the world is in rhythm, she says. The river rises and falls. The sun fights and returns. You breathe in. You breathe out. Everything depends on everything. A quirky tidbit drifts into memory. Egyptian judges sometimes wore small golden images of Ma'at around their necks as a reminder that every verdict had cosmic consequences. Imagine a courtroom where a lie doesn't just shame you. It risks tipping the universe off balance. No pressure. You walk beside her as the river curves toward the horizon. Each step feels lighter, as though her presence quietly straightens something in your spine. The world itself seems cleaner, edges sharpened by honesty. She pauses at a small shrine half buried in reeds. Inside, a sculpted feather gleams, faintly in the sunlight. Offerings lie before it. A few flowers, a loaf of bread, a polished stone. Nothing grand, but perfectly arranged, balanced. This, she says, is how balance survives. Not in temples or battles, but in small acts done rightly. You can't help but glance at her, curious. Do people still follow you? You ask. She smiles, not sadly exactly, but knowingly. They try, she says. Some forget that balance is not comfort. It is discipline. The word hums in your ears long after she says it. Around you, the world feels almost painfully ordered. The reeds sway evenly in the wind. The ripples on the Nile move like brushed silk, and even the distant workers' laughter falls in rhythmic bursts. It's hypnotic, peaceful, and maybe just a little unnerving. Maya tilts her head. You think it looks dull, don't you? You open your mouth, caught, but she laughs, low, amused, melodic. Even truth must laugh at itself sometimes, she says. Otherwise it hardens into tyranny. It's strange, but comforting. This idea that even cosmic law makes room for humor. She takes a step closer and lifts the feather, letting it hover just above your chest. It stirs slightly, though there's no breeze. Your heart beats evenly, she says. That's good. Keep it so. The feather glows for a moment, and you feel a warmth radiate through you. Not blazing, not divine, just centered, like all the chaos and noise of the night before has been smoothed into a steady hum. Then she lowers the feather. But remember, she adds softly, truth must be renewed as often as dawn. Her eyes turn toward the horizon, where the sky burns pale blue. Even the gods must answer to Ma'at, she says. Without her, we are nothing but stories eating their own tails. For a fleeting second, you see it, everything she means. The constant cycle of life and death, the pulse of the Nile, the balance between joy and sorrow, fury and forgiveness. It's not just law. It's the heartbeat of existence. And then she fades, not dramatically, just gently, like a reflection melting into sunlight. Only the feather remains, drifting on the breeze. It lands near your feet, barely disturbing the sand. You pick it up carefully, turning it in your hand. It weighs almost nothing. You tuck it beside Bastet's amulet. The two together feel right. Fierce love and steady truth, protection and balance. Maybe that's what being alive really is, juggling contradictions and calling it harmony. The Nile murmurs at your side. A heron lifts off from the water, wings slicing the air in perfect rhythm. You breathe with it, matching its slow, deliberate grace. Somewhere faintly Ma'at's voice echoes. Keep it even. And just like that, the balance holds. The feather of Ma'at still glows faintly against your chest as you walk. Each step feels measured, your heartbeat keeping time with the Nile's slow murmur. The balance she spoke of still hums through your veins, but the world ahead grows hotter, brighter, until the air itself seems to shimmer. You squint against the glare, and there it is. A city of white stone rising from the desert, its towers catching the sun like mirrors. Columns carved with lotus blooms line the avenues, and banners ripple lazily in the heat. You can smell incense, hear chanting, and feel that pulse of reverence that tells you this is no ordinary place. This is Heliopolis, the city of the sun, the cradle of Egyptian creation myths, the place where everything began. You move through the gates, and immediately the air shifts. The light here feels alive, golden and pulsing. Priests in linen robes chant in deep, resonant tones, and their words seem to fold the world tighter around them. The scent of frankincense is dizzying, but not unpleasant, like the air itself is praying. At the heart of the temple complex stands an obelisk, taller than any you've seen, gleaming like a frozen ray of sunlight. Beside it, something stirs. A man, no more than a man. Skin the color of burnished bronze, eyes as bright as dawn, crowned with a tall headdress shaped like a sunbeam. You know instantly who he is. Adam, the first god, the self-created one, the beginning of beginnings. He regards you with a smile that feels both ancient and oddly human. You've come far, he says, through darkness and balance, through love and fear. Now you stand where all stories began, where I drew breath from nothing. You glance around. This is where you created the world. He chuckles softly, where I remembered it into being. That's one of the funnier things about Egyptian mythology. Creation isn't always about making something new. Sometimes it's about remembering what was always meant to exist. Historians still argue whether Adam truly represented the first god, or if he was a poetic stand-in for an older, more abstract force. The moment when order separated from the swirling waters of chaos, none. But everyone agrees on one thing. He started everything alone. Adam stretches his hands out over the city. In the beginning, he says, there was nothing but water. Endless, quiet waiting. I rose from it like a bubble of breath. He gestures toward a small pool near the temple steps, its surface perfectly still. You kneel beside it, watching the sky reflected there, and for a dizzying second, it feels infinite. At first, he continues, I was alone, and it was unbearable. His voice lowers, almost embarrassed. So I created children, Shu, the air, and Tefnut, the moisture. From them came Geb the earth and Nut the sky. And from their love, the rest of creation spilled forth. He pauses, then adds with a wry grin, It sounds tidier than it was. You stifle a laugh. Family drama? Eternal family drama, he says. Ask Nut about curfews and you'll see. A mainstream fact emerges. The priests of Heliopolis formalized this very story into the Ennead, the 9 primary gods of creation. It wasn't just religion, it was political theology, tying each pharaoh's legitimacy to the same divine lineage that began here. Every ruler was a continuation of Adam's first act, a reminder that power was sacred only when it kept chaos at bay. The temple bells chime, pulling your attention to the obelisk again. It glows brighter, humming with the sunlight it channels. Adam follows your gaze. That, he says, is my shadow turned solid, the Bimbin stone, the first hill to rise from the waters of Nun. All pyramids remember it. A quirky tidbit flashes in your mind. Some scholars believe the tip of every pyramid, the capstone, was meant to represent the Bimbin, gilded so it would blaze at sunrise, a miniature version of this cosmic moment. It's basically divine architectural fan service. Adam walks closer, his form half light, half solid. Creation, he murmurs, wasn't one act. It's a heartbeat that never stops. The world is made every morning and forgotten every night. That's why our A sails, why Ma'at weighs, why you dream. You look up at him, squinting into the light. And if one day we stop remembering, then it all sinks back, he says simply, into none, into stillness. His words feel like sunlight and gravity at once, comforting and terrifying. The air around you vibrates. A low hum rises from the temple floor, as if the stone itself is alive. The priest's chants grow louder, echoing through the pillars. Adam closes his eyes. They're doing what I once did, he says, speaking the world awake. The sound builds until it's no longer sound at all. It's feeling, a vibration that rattles your bones, but soothes your heart. The obelisk flares white-hot, and you see visions flicker across its surface, rivers forming, stars igniting, birds taking flight, people laughing under the first blue sky. For one impossible heartbeat, you see everything, creation as an ongoing pulse, not a single event. The gods aren't just figures, they're gears in a great rhythm. And so are you. When the light fades, Adam stands quietly, watching you with something close to pride. Now you understand, he says. We all build. We all maintain. The difference is whether we do it with love or fear. He reaches out, placing a single golden bead in your palm. It glows softly, warm as the sun. A spark, he says. Carry it. Remember that beginnings are never behind you. They're beneath every step. You close your fingers around it, feeling the pulse steady and real. The city shimmers, melting back into dunes. The obelisk becomes a mirage. The chanting fades, and when you blink, you're standing once again in open desert. But the sand is warm now, almost alive beneath your feet. You hold up the bead. It flickers once, like a wink. Somewhere, Adam's voice echoes on the wind. Keep creating, little one. The gods get tired too. You laugh softly under your breath. It's a tired laugh, but an honest one. And above you, the sun burns steady, reminding you that even eternity starts somewhere. The golden bead glows faintly in your palm as you walk. The desert stretches in all directions, dunes shifting like waves under the sun's relentless gaze. The warmth isn't cruel now, it's alive. Like the pulse of creation, Adam spoke of still hums beneath your skin. You can almost hear it if you listen closely. The heartbeat of the world, thudding beneath the sand. But soon, another sound rises to meet it. Not divine chanting, not the wind sigh. Something deeper, rougher. The low rumble of stone grinding against stone. Ahead, The dunes part, revealing a colossal shape carved straight from the earth. Two enormous towers guard a gateway so tall it swallows the horizon. And beyond it, faintly shimmering in the heat, you glimpse something vast: pillars, statues, corridors stretching toward infinity. The air thickens with incense and echoes. You found yourself at Karnak, the great temple complex of Ammonius. For a moment, you just stand there, small as dust beneath its walls. The columns rise like petrified forests, painted with stories older than memory. Sunlight filters through the gaps above, scattering into shafts of gold and shadow. It's both overwhelming and strangely soothing, like walking through the chest of a sleeping god. Then you hear footsteps behind you. A man approaches, muscular, dark-skinned, wearing a plumed crown shaped like twin feathers. His eyes gleam with that peculiar mix of authority and weariness that only comes from being the most important deity for far too long. "Ammonius," you whisper. He smiles slightly. "So you've heard of me." It's a humble thing to say for a god who once ruled the entire pantheon, but his tone makes it sound almost like a joke. "You could say I was popular," he continues, glancing up at the enormous pylons. "Once upon a time. Ammonius, the hidden one, the unseen god who became king of all gods when Egypt rose to its imperial height. To the people, he was both invisible and everywhere, the wind, the breath, the presence behind every triumph. And in Thebes, this temple complex was his beating heart. As you follow him through the halls, priests pass by in silent lines, their linen robes whispering over the stone. Offerings of bread and lotus are laid out on carved altars. The air smells of cedar smoke and river clay. Ammonius' hand brushes one of the painted columns. "Do you know what they built this for?" he asks. You hesitate. "Worship." He chuckles. "Partly, but mostly reassurance. Even gods need a place to remember themselves." That lands heavier than you expect. The idea that divinity could waver, that even eternity needs to remind itself of its own purpose. A mainstream fact flickers through your mind. Karnak was expanded by nearly every pharaoh for over 1,500 years. Each ruler added their mark: new halls, new shrines, new obelisks, trying to outdo the last. It became a living timeline of Egypt's faith, power, and ego, all stacked in layers of sandstone and sunlight. Historians still argue. Ammonius says, as though reading your thoughts, whether I was one god or many, hidden and revealed, male and female, creator and king. Maybe they're all right. He turns to face you, eyes bright with mischief. Mortals always want their gods tidy. I never was. A breeze stirs the incense, and you catch something faint, a second voice, softer, melodic. It whispers through the columns like a sigh. Ammonius smiles knowingly. You hear her. He steps aside, and from the shadows another figure emerges, a woman draped in white and gold, her crown bearing the tall plumes and sun disk that mark her as divine. Her presence feels different, not the heavy authority of a ruler, but the quiet gravity of devotion itself. Ammonius, she says gently, likes to take credit for everything. You bow your head. Mut, you breathe. Ammonius' consort, the mother goddess, fierce protector of Thebes, sometimes depicted as a vulture, sometimes a woman of endless calm. Mut circles you once, assessing. You've met many gods, she says. Few remember to listen between their words. You nod, unsure what to say. A quirky tidbit flickers up. During certain festivals, Mut statues were carried from her temple to meet Ammonius in grand processions along the Nile. Crowds filled the banks, cheering as the divine pair reunited each year, a cosmic love story disguised as civic theater. You can almost hear the drums and see the banners. Ammonius catches your smile. It's true, he admits. They loved a spectacle. Mut elbows him lightly. You loved a spectacle. The two exchange a look that's half affection, half ancient exasperation. For beings older than civilization, they feel startlingly human. As they walk with you deeper into the temple, the light dims, the air cools, the walls tighten into corridors etched with prayers. Ammonius' tone softens. Power is not glory, he says. It's endurance. It's holding form when the wind changes. He pauses at a small chamber filled with flickering oil lamps. The flame light dances over carvings of Ammonius as a man with ram's horns, a symbol of hidden strength and fertility. "Do you know why they called me the Hidden One?" he asks. You shake your head. "Because even when you couldn't see me," he says, "I was there. Like air, like love, like doubt." The room feels smaller suddenly, the weight of those words pressing in. Mut touches your arm gently. "The hidden does not mean the absent," she says. "Remember that." And just like that, you realize she's not just talking about gods. She's talking about everything. Hope, meaning, memory. Ammonius steps closer to the doorway, where sunlight spills in once more. Thebes fell. The temples cracked. My name faded. But wind still moves, doesn't it? You feel it then, a soft breath stirring the dust, cool and endless. "That's me," he says simply. The light shifts, catching on the bead in your hand. It glows, answering the sunlight. Ammonia's smile fades into something gentler. "You'll forget this," he says. "They always do. But the world remembers for you." He lifts a hand, and the air trembles faintly, like a sigh through leaves. "Go," he whispers. "There are other gods waiting in the wind." And then he's gone. Just air again, invisible, present everywhere. You look toward Mut, but she's already fading too, her outlines scattering into tiny feathers that drift through the temple and vanish. For a moment, the silence feels heavy. Then slowly, the columns begin to hum, not with sound, but vibration. You feel it in your ribs. A heartbeat. The hidden god's breath. You exhale and step back into the sun. You walk for what feels like hours through the glowing heat, the hum of Ammonius' temple still echoing in your chest. The wind shifts, carrying a sweeter scent this time, honey, incense, and something floral that feels like home even though you can't name it. The air softens, the light becomes buttery, and the sound of laughter, actual, mortal laughter, filters through palm trees ahead. When you emerge from the sand's glare, you find yourself in Bubastis, the city of cats. It's unlike any place you've seen in Egypt so far. The streets are narrower, the houses painted in bright ochre and blue. Everywhere, cats lounge on walls, curl in baskets, and strut between the market stalls with regal disinterest. You swear one of them winks at you before sauntering off. The crowd here feels different too. Relaxed, domestic, warm. The people are dressed not for rituals or battle, but for daily life. Women carry baskets of figs, children chase kittens, and an old man naps in the shade with a smile. It's the first place in this long divine journey that feels human. And yet there she is. In the square's heart stands a golden statue, sleek, poised, radiant. A woman's body with a cat's head, adorned in jewelry that catches every glint of sunlight. You don't even need her to speak to know her name. "Batet," you whisper. She steps down from her pedestal as though the statue itself just decided to move. Her fur gleams like polished obsidian, her eyes bright green and amused. "You've come a long way," she purrs, her voice both velvet and smoke. "You must be tired." You're not sure if she means physically or spiritually, but either way, she's right. She gestures toward a shaded courtyard where women are preparing offerings. Milk, honey cakes, polished mirrors. A musician plucks a soft tune on a lute, and the air hums with domestic peace. "This," Batet says, stretching luxuriously, "is what balance looks like." She wasn't always the gentle goddess of home, though. A mainstream fact bubbles up in your memory. Batet began as a fierce lioness, a protector of the pharaoh and destroyer of chaos. Over centuries, she softened, becoming a guardian of the hearth, fertility, and music. Yet her claws were never forgotten. Egyptians loved her because she embodied both tenderness and danger. "You remember my sister, Sekhmet," she says, as if reading your thoughts. "She burns cities. I keep the fires warm." You chuckle quietly. "So you're the cozy version?" Her eyes glint. "Cozy, until someone threatens what I love." One of the kittens by her feet mews softly, and she bends to scratch its chin. That's the secret of us cats. Soft fur, sharp teeth. A breeze stirs the courtyard, carrying the rhythmic beat of hand drums. A small festival is beginning, dancers moving gracefully, their movements mirroring feline agility. The audience claps in gentle rhythm. A few cats weave between their legs like living ribbons. Historians still argue. Batet murmurs, watching them, whether my worship was ever just religion. Maybe it was also resistance. You glance at her, curious. Egypt, she says, her tail flicking idly. Wasn't only kings and pyramids. It was mothers protecting homes, midwives whispering prayers, girls lighting lamps before sleep. When they called my name, they were protecting what men often forgot to value. You take that in, feeling the quiet power behind her words. This isn't grandeur, it's endurance. As you walk with her through the streets, the sun dips lower, tinting everything amber. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Egyptian households often mummified their cats when they died, believing they'd serve their owners in the afterlife. Entire cat necropolises have been found, with thousands of carefully wrapped felines buried in jars or small coffins. Batet notices your expression and smirks. You humans do love dramatics, but I suppose it's flattering. One child offers her a garland of flowers. Batet kneels, placing it delicately around her neck. The petals catch on her fur, and for a moment, she looks less like a deity and more like someone's beloved pet, except her eyes still glow with the weight of eternity. You stroll through a garden of papyrus and sycamore trees. The hum of insects thickens in the air, and Bastet's tone softens again. You've met gods of death, power, and chaos, she says. They build and destroy in cycles. But we, she gestures to the cats perched lazily on the walls, we simply live. And that's its own kind of divinity. You think about that as the sky darkens, stars beginning to prick through the violet dusk. The small fires in the courtyards flicker to life. Families gather for evening meals. Batet pauses, watching them with contentment. They'll forget my name one day, she says, but they'll still stroke their cats and whisper secrets into their fur. That's enough. The humility in her voice surprises you. You almost ask if it bothers her, being remembered as a household pet instead of a goddess, but she seems to know the question before you speak it. Mortals don't need to worship to remember, she says. They just need to love. That's how gods stay alive. A hush falls over the courtyard. The music fades. Only the soft purring of dozens of cats fills the silence. Batet smiles, tilting her head slightly. You're not done yet, she murmurs, but you're closer to peace than when you started. You look down at the golden bead still in your hand. It hums faintly, warmer now, almost as if it's been purring too. Keep it safe, she says. Every story has its guardian, and tonight that's you. She touches your forehead lightly, her claws cool against your skin. The world ripples. When your vision clears, the courtyard is empty. Only the cats remain, watching you with unreadable eyes. A single one, small, gray, and perfectly still, meows once and turns toward the open road, glancing back expectantly. You sigh, smile, and follow. The night stretches ahead, cool and glimmering, the moon rippling faintly across the Nile's calm surface. You follow the gray cat until it disappears into the reeds, leaving you alone with the whisper of frogs and the far-off rustle of crocodiles sliding into water. The air grows thicker, the ground softer beneath your feet. Somewhere nearby, something snaps, a branch, or maybe bones. You're suddenly very aware that this is not Bastet's cozy courtyard anymore. The smell hits next, muddy, wet, a little too alive. You glance toward the dark riverbank and see them, gleaming eyes, unblinking, half-submerged. At least half a dozen crocodiles, their scaly backs glinting faintly in the moonlight. And then, from behind them, the water rises. A massive shape emerges, part man, part beast, with a head like the crocodile's but crowned in gold and plumes. His muscles ripple like carved stone, his teeth catching the moonlight. Yet his eyes are calm, almost thoughtful. Sobek. You breathe, try not to sound terrified. The crocodile god grins, and for an instant, it's hard to tell if that's reassurance or threat. You know my name, he says, his voice low and gravelly, like boulders shifting underwater. Then you know what I am. Protector of the Nile. You manage. God of strength. and fertility. He snorts, amused. You make it sound so polite. Yes, protector, destroyer, lover, guardian. Depends who's telling the story. He wades closer, the water parting around him like obedient servants. Each footstep makes a dull, wet sound that echoes off the reeds. You remember a mainstream fact. Sobek was worshipped across Egypt, but especially in Fayum, where sacred crocodiles were raised in temple pools, pampered with meat, and adorned with jewelry. When they died, they were mummified, complete with gilded wrappings and offerings of perfume. Historians still argue whether those were my avatars, Sobek says, crouching to trail a claw through the water, or just symbols. But what's the difference, really? The people needed something they could touch. His hand surfaces, dripping, holding a small lotus blossom. They feared the crocodile, he continues. So they fed it. They prayed to it. And by doing so, they found peace. You swallow. You think fear can bring peace. He gives you a toothy grin. Oh, absolutely. The trick is teaching fear to serve you instead of devour you. The river stirs around you, fish darting from unseen depths. In the distance, a crocodile bellows, deep, resonant, primal. Sobek's eyes gleam. Chaos has its uses, he says. The Nile floods, destroys, renews. Without that cycle, Egypt starves. Without me, he gestures toward the vast expanse of water. This land would dry and crack like old paint. The moon slips behind a cloud, and for a moment, the darkness deepens. The only light comes from the faint shimmer of your golden bead, still glowing softly in your hand. Sobek notices. Ah, he rumbles. A gift from Ammonius, yes? Hidden power. He leans closer, the humid air thick around you. Be careful with such things. Hidden power always demands something in return. You hesitate. Like what? He chuckles. You'll find out. You try to read his expression, but his eyes are ancient and reptilian, impossible to decipher. To distract yourself, you glance at the shoreline. There's movement, humans this time. A group of priests approach carrying torches and bowls of offerings. They kneel, chanting softly in a rhythm that seems to sync with the lapping of the water. Sobek straightens, watching them with something close to fondness. They come every full moon, he says. Bring me bread, beer, sometimes fish, occasionally a fine bit of jewelry. He grins again, never complains. You raise an eyebrow. They wouldn't dare. His laughter booms, shaking the reeds. No, I suppose not. One of the priests sets a carved crocodile figurine on the bank. The flames of their torches reflect in its polished eyes. You notice that the priests look more grateful than fearful. They pray not to avoid death, but to ask for strength, protection, fertility. Sobek's shadow looms over them like a guardian statue. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Archaeologists once found crocodiles buried with baby crocodiles in their stomachs, perhaps symbolic of rebirth, or the endless cycle of creation devouring itself. It's unsettling and strangely poetic at once. Sobek seems to sense your thought. Death feeds life, he says. Always has. Always will. Humans just pretend otherwise because it's inconvenient. The priests finish their chant, bow low, and retreat. Sobek watches them disappear into the dark. Then he turns back to you. Tell me, he says softly, what do you fear? The question hangs in the air, heavy as the humidity. You open your mouth, but realize you don't have an answer. Or maybe you have too many. Sobek tilts his head, the moonlight glinting along his scales. That's what I thought. He rises, water cascading off his shoulders. Fear isn't weakness, traveler. It's a compass. Ignore it, and you drown. Follow it, and you might find land. He steps closer until you can smell the river on his breath. Remember that when you meet the next one. Next what? You ask, voice barely above a whisper. He grins again, the smile of someone who knows exactly how terrifying they look. Next God. You're not done yet. The water surges suddenly, cold and heavy, swirling around your legs. You stumble, the world spinning. You reach for Sobek, but he's already sinking back into the Nile, his laughter fading beneath the waves. When you blink the water from your eyes, you're alone again. The reeds sway gently. The moon drifts free of its cloud, silvering the world once more. Something brushes your ankle. You look down. A small crocodile hatchling, no longer than your arm, paddling beside you. It blinks once, then vanishes into the current. You sigh, half laughing. Fine. Message received. As you wade to the bank, you notice your bead is glowing brighter now. Its warmth steady, reassuring, alive. Somewhere in the darkness, a deep, distant rumble of laughter rolls across the river, and then fades into silence. You lie back on the sand, breathing hard, the stars wheeling overhead. The Nile murmurs softly beside you, ancient and endless, and for once, you feel not afraid, but small in a good way, like part of something impossibly vast and alive. The river whispers you awake. Dawn has just begun to slide its soft pink fingers across the horizon, turning the Nile into a ribbon of molten silver. You sit up, wet sand clinging to your arms, the golden bead pulsing faintly in your hand. The air feels different now, lighter, cooler, threaded with something almost mathematical in its rhythm, as if the world itself is counting under its breath. A faint rustle draws your attention. There, perched on a smooth rock by the water, stands a tall figure draped in linen the color of moonlight. His head is that of an ibis, long, graceful, curved like a stylus. He's holding a reed pen in one hand, a scroll in the other. You're early, the god says without looking up. His voice is soft but precise, each word balanced perfectly, like notes in a scale. Thoth, you say. He nods. And you, mortal traveler, have been busy. He unfurls his scroll with one deft movement. The papyrus glows faintly in the dawn. Let's see, Adam, Ra, Isis, Horus, Batet, Sobek. He glances up amused. You're collecting gods like some people collect cats. You smile despite yourself. It wasn't exactly intentional. Nothing in Egypt ever is, Thoth says dryly. It all balances out eventually. He dips the reed pen into a small inkwell that appears, impossibly, out of the morning mist. The air hums faintly with power. Do you know why I write? He asks, sketching a small spiral in the air that glows gold before fading. You hesitate. To record. He chuckles. To remember. Recording is a human thing, dead, mechanical. Remembering is divine. A mainstream fact flickers through your thoughts. Thoth was considered the god of wisdom, writing, science, and the moon. Egyptians believed he invented language itself, that he weighed truth in the afterlife, and even helped Isis resurrect Osiris by reciting spells so precise they rewove the fabric of death. Thoth glances at you again, that strange ibis gaze both alien and oddly kind. Historians still argue whether I created writing or simply discovered it, he says. But what's the difference? Discovery is just remembering what you already knew. He gestures for you to follow. You walk together along the riverbank, where the sand sparkles faintly under the strengthening light. Birds rise from the reeds, crying into the sky. Somewhere in the distance, temple bells ring. Thoth pauses at a cluster of low stone pillars, half buried in sand. Each one is carved with strange symbols, eyes, feathers, spirals, stars. He touches them lightly. These, he says, are not just pictures. They are thoughts frozen in time. Every glyph a prayer, every line a breath. He traces one with a stylus. When a scribe writes a god's name, they aren't recording, they're summoning. The thought makes you shiver. Then what happens when people stop writing those names? Thoth's beak tilts, almost a smile. We fade from your tongues, he says softly, but not from the fabric of things. Words may vanish, but meaning finds new shapes. You think of Bastet's cats, of Sobek's river, of the faint hum you felt in Ammonius' temple. He's right, none of them are truly gone. They've simply changed addresses. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your memory. Ancient Egyptian scribes used to mix crushed beetles into their ink, believing it gave words vitality, a spark of divine life. You mention it aloud, and Thoth's eyes gleam with amusement. Oh yes, he says. Terribly messy business, but effective. Ink that breathes. You humans will mix anything if it means touching eternity. He begins to write again, this time directly onto the air. Each hieroglyph hovers for a heartbeat, shimmering, before dissolving into the wind. Everything written is alive, he says. That's the secret I gave you. And the burden. You watch the symbols fade, their afterimage lingering behind your eyelids. You sound tired. You say quietly. He pauses. Even wisdom must rest. You mortals never realize how heavy knowledge becomes when you've carried it for eternity. The light shifts. The sun lifts higher, and the moon's faint silver fades from the sky. Thoth looks up at it wistfully. I borrowed the moon, he says suddenly. You blink. What? He turns to you. Tone conspiratorial. R.A. and I had an arrangement. He had too much light. I had too little. So I took just enough from his crown to balance the night. You laugh, startled. You stole the moonlight. He raises a finger. Borrowed. With divine interest. It's a perfect system. Half the world wakes, while the other half dreams. Balance. His eyes narrow playfully. Of course, historians still argue whether that story's true or not. The way he says it makes you suspect he's the one who started the argument in the first place. As the morning deepens, the world around you seems sharper, edges defined, shadows clear. Thoth crouches, scooping up a handful of sand. Even this, he says, letting it trickle through his fingers, is a kind of language. The earth remembers footsteps, the river remembers tides, the air remembers every word ever spoken. You realize he's not exaggerating. You can feel it, the hum of memory in everything, from the chirping birds to the sighing reeds. Nothing is lost, he murmurs, only rewritten. He dips his stylus once more and draws a single glyph on your palm. It tingles faintly, warm but not painful. For clarity, he says, you'll need it soon. You glance at your hand, where the symbol glows softly before fading into your skin. What happens if I forget the stories? You ask. Thoth's gaze softens. You won't. Not really. They'll just come back as dreams, or metaphors, or bedtime videos. He tilts his head. You humans are very creative about remembering. You grin. We try. He inclines his head. Then keep trying. He turns, beginning to fade into the glare of the morning. The ibis shape dissolves into white feathers that drift down and vanish. The wind carries one last whisper. The next will test what you've learned. Be brave and patient. You stand alone on the riverbank again, the air quiet except for the gentle ripple of water and the faint hum of words that never die. The golden bead in your hand pulses once, brighter than ever, as if agreeing. You close your fingers around it and keep walking. The road grows hotter again. The Nile fades behind you, replaced by the endless glare of desert. Heat shimmers and waves across the sand, and the air hums with the low, mirage-like buzz of unseen energy. Each breath tastes of dust and sunlight. The bead in your palm is cooled, but you can still feel a faint heartbeat inside it, steady, waiting. Then, the horizon starts to ripple, as if the heat itself were pulling apart. You hear a roar. No, not quite a roar. It's laughter, wild and ragged, somewhere between delight and fury. The sky deepens to a harsh gold. And there she stands. Sekhmet. Her presence hits you like a sandstorm. A towering woman with a lioness's head, her mane glinting like molten copper. She radiates heat, literal, searing heat. Around her, the sand seems to hiss. Her eyes are sunfire. Her smile, though, is strangely serene. You look nervous, she says, her voice rough but melodic, like a purr rumbling through flame. Maybe just respectfully cautious, you say, try not to melt. She tilts her head. Good. Caution keeps mortals alive, though not for long, usually. She starts to walk, and you follow instinctively. Each step leaves smoldering prints in the sand. Sekhmet stretches languidly. You've met my gentler sister, Batet. She likes comfort. I like correction. Correction, you ask. Her grin widens. When mortals forget gratitude, when gods forget humility, when balance tilts too far. She raises a hand, and a flicker of light bursts across the dunes, a brief, blinding image of cities burning, temples collapsing, priests screaming prayers too late. You swallow. So you're balanced by fire. She chuckles. Exactly. The cleanup crew of divinity. A mainstream fact floats up. Sekhmet was known as the Eye of Ra, the weapon he unleashed when humanity rebelled. Her breath was said to form the desert winds, her bloodlust nearly unstoppable. According to myth, she nearly wiped out humanity before Ra tricked her into stopping. Historians still argue, she says suddenly, whether that story was meant as a warning or a celebration. She looks sideways at you. I like to think it was both. You find your voice. What happened after you stopped? Sekhmet pauses. Her expression shifts from amusement to something softer, almost embarrassment. Ah yes, the beer incident. She sighs, crossing her arms. So Ra decided I'd gone too far. The blood, the screaming, it was all very dramatic. So he dyed thousands of jars of beer red and poured them across the battlefield. I thought it was blood. You bite your lip to keep from laughing. Yes, yes, she says dryly. I drank it all. Every last drop. Woke up 3 days later with the worst divine hangover in recorded history. And by then, the humans were alive again. So the world was saved by beer. She smirks. Don't look so surprised. Mortals have been using it to survive me ever since. You can't help it, you laugh. And for a brief moment, the heat around her seems to ease. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. During festivals in her honor, Egyptians would actually drink red-colored beer to celebrate Sekhmet's cooling, hoping to pacify her and prevent plagues or droughts. Thousands would gather to feast and dance, part worship, part collective therapy. You mortals learned well, she says, almost approvingly. Celebrate your survival before it burns away again. She sits down on a rock that looks suspiciously molten, resting her chin on her hand. Do you know what most people forget? What's that? I didn't start as a destroyer, she says quietly. I started as healing. Every fever, every flame that burned out sickness, that was me too. But humans, they remember the fire, not the cure. The tone of her voice softens, and suddenly, you glimpse something behind the ferocity, weariness, maybe even sadness. Historians still argue, she continues, whether I was ever separate from Hathor, the joyful one. Some say we were the same goddess, just in different moods. She gives a low chuckle. Wouldn't that explain a lot? You nod slowly. So you're the same goddess who pours love and who spills blood? Sekhmet shrugs. Balance again. Without heat, you freeze. Without mercy, you rot. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of myrrh and roasted grain. In the distance, you see a cluster of tents, a celebration. Music drifts faintly, laughter rising in warm waves. Come, she says. Let's see if mortals still remember to toast me properly. You follow her toward the glow. The camp bursts into view, a festival in full swing. Drums beat in hypnotic rhythm. Dancers whirl with red ribbons trailing like fire. Jugs of reddish beer pass from hand to hand. Someone shouts a blessing to the lion goddess, and the crowd cheers. Sekhmet watches with an unreadable expression. The flickering light paints her golden fur in shades of flame. They drink, she says softly, to keep me happy. They think it works. You hesitate. Does it? Her lips curl into a small, enigmatic smile. Most days. She takes one of the cups from a passing tray and swirls it idly. Funny thing, she says. Mortals always think destruction is the end. But I've seen every city they've built burn down and rise again. Sometimes fire is the only way the world remembers how to start fresh. You think of all the gods you've met, of creation, balance, writing, and love, and realize that destruction is just another kind of continuation. Sekhmet raises her cup in a toast to endings that aren't really endings. You clink your invisible cup in return. The beer tastes of honey and smoke. The drums grow louder, faster. The crowd sways, ecstatic, and for one dizzying moment, you feel the whole world dance with her. Flame and laughter, chaos and rhythm perfectly in sync. Then the music slows, and so does her glow. The fire around her dims, settling into a warm amber hue. Go, she says, her voice now softer, almost tender. You've burned enough for one night. You blink, and she's gone. Only the faint smell of myrrh remains, drifting through the cooling air. The festival continues without her. Laughter, song, and the hiss of poured beer rise into the starlit sky. You look at your bead. It glows with a faint red pulse now, as if it remembers her warmth. You tuck it close to your heart and start walking again, guided by the fading rhythm of drums behind you. You step back into the sunlight, blinking as the temple's cool shadows give way to heat again. The Nile glints nearby, its surface scattered with sunlight like crushed gold leaf. Beyond the river, fields stretch endlessly, patchwork greens bordered by canals, dotted with workers whose songs drift faintly on the breeze. Egypt breathes in rhythms, not just the rise and fall of the Nile, but the everyday pulse of devotion woven into ordinary life. The farmers chant blessings to Hapi, the god of the inundation, asking him for a generous flood. The fishermen whisper to Khnum, who shapes lives on his potter's wheel. And even the children tossing pebbles into the water murmur quick apologies to the river, to whatever small spirit they might have disturbed. You pause by a dock where a scribe sits cross-legged, scrolls spread around him. He dips his reed pen in ink made of soot and gum, his strokes precise, confident. Curious, you lean closer and ask what he's writing. "Letters to the dead," he replies, not looking up. You blink. "Letters to the dead?" He nods, smiling faintly. "We write to our ancestors when we need advice or forgiveness. Sometimes they answer." The idea sends a quiet thrill through you, the sense that in this world, death wasn't a wall, just another doorway with a well-oiled hinge. Egyptians didn't divide life and afterlife sharply. They were two halves of the same map. The scribe rolls his parchment and ties it neatly with twine. A man writes to his mother when his business fails, he says. He asks her to speak kindly to the gods. Maybe the next harvest is better. Maybe not. But he's reminded he's not alone. You thank him and continue walking. A group of children runs past you, waving tiny wooden boats. They're racing them in the irrigation canal, laughing wildly. One boy trips, sending his toy spinning away. His friend grins and shouts, "Don't worry, Hapi will bring it back." And somehow, you believe him. You stop at a nearby stall, where a woman grinds blue pigment from lapis lazuli. The powder gleams like frozen sky. "For the eyes of statues," she explains. "The gods like to see through color." You tilt your head. "So they can see through us?" She laughs softly. "No, through themselves. We just help." Her hands move with practiced grace, mixing the pigment with gum and oil. You watch as she paints the tiny eye of Horus on a clay amulet, the lines confident and steady. "Protection," she says, holding it up, "for travelers, sailors, or anyone who looks too far into the dark." You slip one into your palm. The symbol's curves feel smooth and ancient, the cobalt glinting in the light. Nearby, an elderly priestess scatters herbs across a brazier. The smoke curls upward, fragrant with coriander and cedar. "The gods listen through scent," she tells a young boy beside her. "They don't have noses like ours, but smell reaches places words can't." You smile, another sensory bridge between human and divine. As the afternoon deepens, the city hums, with small devotions. A blacksmith scratches a symbol into a new blade before it cools. A mother hums a lullaby invoking Hathor's kindness. Even a drunk fisherman slumped by the dock mutters, "Sorry, Sobek," before tipping his cup into the water. Historians still argue whether Egyptians truly believed these acts worked or whether they were just cultural habit, like knocking on wood. But walking here, seeing the love and patience in each gesture, you suspect it didn't matter. Faith wasn't proof. It was rhythm. The sky begins to blush orange. You wander to a quiet courtyard where a small crowd has gathered. A storyteller sits cross-legged on a reed mat, his voice gentle and roughened with age. He's telling a story of Anubis guiding a lost soul, his hands weaving invisible paths through the air. The listeners nod slowly, half smiling, half dreaming. When he finishes, he notices you and pats the ground beside him. "You've traveled far," he says knowingly. "Looking for gods, maybe?" You grin. "Something like that." He leans back, eyes crinkling. "Then here's your answer. The gods aren't up there." He points to the darkening sky. "They're right here, in the taste of bread, the creak of a door, the hum of a bee. We built temples so big they scrape the stars, but the gods, he taps his chest, they like small places better. The crowd disperses slowly, leaving behind a glow of oil lamps, flickering like captured starlight. You stay a moment longer, breathing in the scent of warm stone and lotus. Somewhere, a cat meows, and you could swear it sounds like laughter. As night descends, you make your way toward the edge of town. The sounds of the day fade, drums replaced by crickets, laughter replaced by gentle snoring behind shuttered windows. The Nile murmurs beside you, its voice eternal. You glance down at your hand. The amulet glows faintly blue in the moonlight, its carved lines seeming to shift as though alive. Perhaps it's a trick of your tired eyes, or perhaps, as the old man said, the gods really do prefer small places. You tuck it into your pocket, smile, and keep walking. Tomorrow, the journey will end. But tonight, you're exactly where ancient Egypt wanted you to be, balanced between myth and sleep, where every whisper feels half prayer, half dream. The last stretch of your journey begins under a sky washed pale by dawn. The Nile lies silent in silver, as though the whole river holds its breath. You follow the slow current north, past temples worn smooth by centuries of wind, past statues whose faces have eroded into serene anonymity. The gods, it seems, are fading. You reach Memphis first, the old capital, once a city of marble and ceremony. Now it's quieter. The columns still stand, but their paint has long since flaked away. A few priests sweep the forecourt, keeping the dust at bay. They move with the solemn rhythm of habit, repeating prayers whose meaning even they might have forgotten. Still keeping the faith, you ask gently. The eldest priest smiles, his wrinkles deep as river channels. Faith doesn't fade, he says. Only the language changes. You walk with him through the shadowed halls. The statues loom large and cracked. Ra's face is chipped, Hathor's eyes are dim. In one corner, a small shrine glows with a single candle, new wax, fresh smoke. Someone somewhere still remembers. He follows your gaze. The Greeks call him Helios now, he murmurs. The Romans will call him Sol. But the light is the same. You nod, watching the candle flicker. Egypt's gods are slipping into other tongues, other temples. You can almost hear them, soft voices moving beneath marble floors in Athens, under Roman mosaics, in whispered prayers carried west across the sea. The priest sighs. Every empire believes its gods will last forever. Ours lasted longer than most. He gestures to the fading murals, scenes of creation, of Osiris rising, of Ra's nightly voyage. But even the sun sets. Outside, the city hums with foreign sounds. Greek words mingle with Egyptian greetings. Soldiers in bronze armor patrol near the riverbanks. Vendors sell figs and olive oil beside papyrus scrolls. Cultures are merging, reshaping one another. You cross paths, with a group of travelers carrying small clay lamps, painted with Egyptian symbols and Greek letters. They speak of Isis, but their accents twist her name differently, Isaida. She's spreading beyond the Nile now, carried by sailors and dreamers, her story translated but not forgotten. Mainstream fact, during the Hellenistic and Roman periods, the Egyptian goddess Isis became one of the most widely worshipped deities across the Mediterranean, blending seamlessly with local traditions. Her cult reached from Alexandria to Rome, even into the far corners of Britain. A young woman in the crowd hands you a flower, a lotus dyed with foreign pigment, a strange blend of Egyptian reverence and Greek aesthetics. For the lady of 10,000 names, she says softly. You thank her, tucking it behind your ear. The scent is faint but sweet. You keep walking northward until the great library of Alexandria rises in your imagination, a ghost of light and parchment. You picture scholars from every corner of the world debating under its vaulted ceilings. Historians still argue. You think with a wry smile, whether Egypt's myths were preserved there, or whether they were already half forgotten before the first scroll burned. But even if the words faded, the essence endured. In the harbor, sailors carve protective eyes of Horus onto their ships, muttering prayers against storms. Mothers whisper to Batet before sending sons to sea. And the sunset, oh, that ancient gold, still glows exactly as it did in the time of Ra. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some Roman emperors built private shrines to Egyptian gods, draping their statues in both togas and linen robes, hedging their bets for favor from all pantheons. Humans, it seems, have always been pragmatic in matters of eternity. You climb a low hill overlooking the delta. The wind carries the scent of salt and papyrus. Below you, the Nile splinters into countless channels, feeding the sea like veins returning to a heart. Egypt ends here, but also begins again, eternally renewed by its own stories. You close your eyes and let the centuries roll through your mind, from Adam's first breath in the void, to Isis's whispered spells, to Sekhmet's fiery laughter and the quiet prayers of bakers and scribes. You've walked through every layer of belief, every grain of faith left behind. You realize something soft and inevitable. The myths never really vanished. They just changed clothes. When someone lights a candle to find peace, that's Isis's flame. When someone writes their thoughts to survive time, that's Thoth's ink. When someone protects their home with laughter, that's Best still grinning in the corner. You open your eyes. The horizon shimmers with morning light. The river, the sand, the breath of wind, they all hum together in a language you now understand without needing to translate. Egypt never died. It only learned to dream differently. You sit, watching the water. The bead in your pocket warms one last time before fading to stillness. The journey is over. The gods have gone quiet, but the world still glows with their afterimage. And as you listen to the whisper of reeds and the slow lap of waves, your body begins to ease, your breath slowing with the rhythm of the Nile.